Everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to the Neo4j Twitch channel. My name is Adam, and today we'll be continuing on our journey of learning how to build web applications with Neo4j and TypeScript. What we'll do is we'll carry on from last week's session. And in last week's session, what we're doing is we're looking at this real-world example. And what we're trying to do is to build an implementation on Neo4j. So in this case, because we're looking at Neo4j, we're looking at TypeScript, we're looking at using Nest.js for that. And then our end goal really is to come up with a backend which will work with one of these front ends. So for example, the React example. So hopefully by the end of this session, we'll be able to power this application. But the TLDR of the situation is we've created an application, and basically based on the Neoflix example I've been working through in the last few weeks. So if you haven't seen that project, you can go to my GitHub and go to twitch-project, and then this will this gives you an example of an application and how to integrate Neo4j with Nest.js and with TypeScript. So using the Neo4j driver with TypeScript. I've taken all of the useful parts of that repository and then put it into its own package. So that's this Nest Neo4j. So if you run npm install Nest Neo4j and then register the module in your app module, then this will give you access to the Neo4j service and allow you to run queries through that. If you're interested in the code itself, then you can head to the Neo4j Nest.js real-world example app repository. This may move at some point, but for now it's on my GitHub. And basically, this is where we've got to so far. So the real-world example gives you a set of tests inside a Postman collection. So what I've done is I've started to work through all of these and implement the code for that. So we've gone down. We've got the authentication there, so I can run the tests. If I start the server, I can run the tests. And basically, we've got the authentication there, so the same as the Realworld example. So basically, what we're doing is inside a user module, we've got an auth service, and that handles the authentication. So that passes on some information to the user service in order to create a user, and then we can validate that user as well. So if, for example, we take the register route and we follow that through from start to finish. So we have this API URL and then we have /users. So that goes through to the users controller. So anything that is the users controller. So anything is /users will go into to this place. And then we have a post request to get users. So it'll be the index. So in this case, if we post to here, then we get this this route handler, which handles everything. So we've got validation pipes, which will validate this create user DTO to make sure that for example, the email is not empty and it resembles an email address, and the username is not empty, password is not empty, etc. We then use the auth service to we use the user service first to create that. Create the user inside the database, so it creates it inside Neo4j for us. And the way it does that is it uses a cipher statement to run a create command against the database. So we use this Neo4j service, which is part of that Nest Neo4j package, and then we create that, return that, and then return a new instance of this user entity. And then we can use that user entity to then create a JWT token. That JWT token contains certain claims about the user, and it's all encoded using a secret key. So, for example, we have certain information which we can use in the UI in the front end. So, for example, we have the username there, we have the email, the bio, and the image. And then we return that information. So if I run this again, I get all this information, which is basically the result of that route handler and then those services. So I have the user information there, and then we have the token there as well. So if I take a look at this this token in jwt.io, if I copy it correctly. So we can see there we've got the username is Twitch. We have the email address twitch@neo4j.com. We have an image, the issue date time, and then the expiry time, which is the same information we have on the user. So we can use the same classes to log the user in. So you can see the information there. So if we look at the login there, so we basically use a local auth guard, which uses the local strategy, which will find the user, find the user's information and use the auth service to validate that user. So that will go away and that will find the user in the database. So it uses the user service to run a cipher query to pull that user back. And then we use an encryption service there, which is basically under the hood a wrapper for bcrypt, which will check the password the user has supplied against the encrypted password that we store in the database. If everything is fine, then that user entity gets returned. Otherwise, it undefined is returned. And then we use that user, so that user gets appended to the request, and then that we then use that to generate a token, and then we return that information, which is basically the information that we've got there. So we can use that token then to get the user. So if we go to the /user, we use the user controller rather than the users controller, and we find the user there. And then we can update the user as well using a update request. So one thing we didn't really look at in the previous episode, I don't think we got to, was the articles. So as you would do with any Neo4j application, all of your interaction to Neo4j goes through the Neo4j driver. And essentially what we've got inside Nest.js is just a wrapper that will take care of that for you. So for example, we go down to, for example, the user service to create the user. We're using this Neo4j service, and then there's a write method on there for writing. And then we can use the read service to pull the information. So the read method on the Neo4j service to pull that out. So we have an article module here, and that's basically a wrapper there that allows you to register the everything that revolves around the article into the Nest.js application. So we would then register that inside the app module. So this will provide an article service. And then the article service is basically the interaction that we'd use inside the application. So for example, to create an article, so if we look at the create article route, it's basically a post request to /articles with a body. So it's got a title there, description, a body, and then a list of tags. And basically what we do is we take that request via a DTO for validation, and then we then create the user. So this service is an injectable service, but it's got a particular scope on there. So it's a scope of request. So basically what that means is that for every single request that comes into Nest, then a new instance of this article will be this article service will be created, So what we can do is we can inject the request using this this magic string from Nest.js core to inject the request in, and then from there, because the routes are guarded by a particular middleware and an auth guard. So in this case, the JWT auth guard, we can pull that straight from the request. So for example, here, this request.user, and then we can use the get ID method to get the user ID. Then we pass that through as a I hate it when it does that. Yeah, so we pass that through as a parameter. So everything inside these braces is a parameter that we can reference using the dollar. So for example, the user ID, we're referencing that there. So that user ID with the dollar in front of it is the parameter that gets passed through here inside the second argument. And basically what that means is we're protected against any sort of SQL injection, or sorry, cipher injection, similar to SQL injection. So for example, if we were hard coding a string here, and we said the ID was Adam, for example, or we use some sort of interpolation, so we could say, you know, some var. This could be okay, but for example, if it was a string which had something and then you know, delete everything. So that's will be a way of being able to hack into the query. But because we use parameters and those parameters are sent separate to the query itself, it means we're protected against any sort of injection like that. So we first we find the user in the database. So the user should always exist because we've passed them through the authentication process. We then create a random UUID using the random UUID function, and then use that to create an article. So the reason for using that with step is it means that I can use the same random UUID in the ID, and I can also encode it into the slug as well. So I mean, I didn't get two different things there. So that will basically ensure that this slug is always unique. So what I'm saying there is basically create an article and give it an alias or variable of A. So by default, that should have these values. So it should have an ID, which is our UUID. It should have a create that date and an update that date. And then basically in this part, I'm just being a little bit lazy. So all of the information on the article is passed through into the function. So we have the title, the description, and the body. And I just use that basically to create a new object and then pass that through as a parameter of article. And I use the mass assign, so the plus equals will append anything from this article object into the nodes of that the article node. So everything here will be added there. And then I've got the tag lists. So if you look at the payload, the tag list is an array of strings. So I treat these as the IDs or the names of the tags. So I use the for each function to iterate through those for each of the names in that tag list. So give it a variable of name, and then inside the second half of that, so after the pipe, I then find the tag. So I merge it based on the name. And then what I say is, if I'm creating this for the first time, then create an ID for that as well, so a random UUID. And then also assign a slug, so I use the APOC text.slug function to encode that. So instead of having, for example, how to train a dragon, I think it was. Basically, what the slug function will do is it will convert it into slug format. So, for example, it would take all of the strings and then convert those into a dash. So it's kind of more URL friendly. You don't have to encode anything with %20 or something like that. And then once that's all done, I then return that back in. So I'll return all the information back that I need from the query. So I need the user, I need the article. I need a list of all the tag nodes, so I use a pattern comprehension there to pull that information out. I then use the exist function to work out wherever there's a relationship between the user and the article, and then basically return that as a boolean. And then for the account of the number of people that have favorited that that article, then I use the size of that. So basically take a degree count rather than querying through the nodes to find the value. That information then gets pulled out. So I'm always going to have one record from this query. So I use res.record0 to get the first record and assign that to row. And then from there, I can use the get function to get the values from the query. So A is the article, this bit here. So the user is always going to be the request user, so I can use that in the hydration method. Row.get tag list will get me this tag list up here. Favorites count will get the favorites count, and favorited will get the favorited. And then this gets added into a class, so I'll call this like an entity class. And then I have this toJSON function. And what that allows me to do is that just allows me to guarantee that the values are going to be correct. And then inside the article controller, I then call that toJSON function to actually return that to the user. So this is the final output that you get. So I've got this this article which has all of the information on there. It has the user and has the tag list. We can see from the test results that all of the tests here are passing. So in theory, this should now work with the front end. Cool. So if we look at the articles, so the get endpoint for the articles. So there's a few things that we need there. We need the articles count. So we need the count of all of the articles in the database, and then the articles or a list of the articles. So like a paginated list of those articles. So the way I do that in the articles service is I use this list function. So this will return an article response. So that response is the article count and then the articles. So we're adding the typing to that. And then all of the request information is pulled from the request. So there are a few different things that we need to support there. So for example, we need the articles by a particular username, and then we need the articles that are favorited by a particular person, and a particular user. And then we also we have two types of method here. So we have it's all supported by the same service, but we have the same request twice. So for example, if the user is logged in, then we want to know whether they favorited it or not. Otherwise, we don't really care there. But the request needs to handle both of these outcomes. So basically, I use the request that's injected into the article service to pull that information out there. So for example, from the query, I look for the author, and then this satisfies the author request. So this will pull all of the articles and basically all the articles written by the user that I've created using the test suite. And then what I do basically is I start to build up a string there. So I've got this this where array, and then what I do is I use that to create an array of all of the where clauses. So in this case, we want to find all of the articles where they were posted by a user with the username of the author value, which I then add to the params there. Same thing for the favorited. So I want to find everything which has a favorited relationship to a user, which has a username of favorited. So this gets added to the params. And then for the tags, so basically I take the value and then split it by comma, so you can support multiple tags in there. But I'm basically saying that all of the tags in the tags array, so that split string there, where the article has a relationship to a tag with that name. So this then gets run through the Neo4j service. So what I say is find me all of the articles. Then I apply the where clause there. So I say where. So if the length is more than 0, so if anything has been appended to that where clause, then combine all those where clauses using and then prepend it with a where. Otherwise, just do nothing. And then I basically use this intermediate step, so this with step, to work out the counts there. So we take this, for example, this article count before we get the articles. So for example, if we had 100 articles, then we'll want 10 by default, because that'll be the limit. So if we did a match and a where, and then we did all this processing below, then it would be kind of a inefficient query. But what that basically allows us to do is to aggregate everything up into a collection, and we take a count of the articles there, and then unwind those articles again. So we've got the article count. We've now got all of the articles split out onto their own rows again. With that article count and then each of the articles, and then we apply the ordering, and then the pagination, so the skip and the limit. So then we have our list of 10 articles basically, and then we basically return that article count for every row, and then for the each of the articles we return the article, return the author. So we're using again a pattern comprehension to get the first user, or the first U node on the end of this posted relationship from the article. For the tags, we go out through the has tag relationship to a tag node, and then return the T. And then this is a kind of a bit of a hack really. So if the user is logged in, then we'll get the user's user ID using the get ID function. So if this request.user is truthy, then we will assume that it's an instance of a user, and then we'll pull the ID off that. Otherwise, it will be null. So we use that inside the query to say that if the user ID is not null, then we check for a relationship, a favoritive relationship to a node with an ID property of the user ID. But if that's false, then we don't need to check that. So we just say else false. And then we can use the size function to get the size of the number of relationships from this article to any node through the relationship type favorited. And then for the value, once we have the response returned, we use the response. So if there's res.records.length is more than 0, then we can take that article count from the first row. But if there are no articles returned, then it's basically 0. And then for the articles themselves, we use the records array, which is against the response. And we map that. So each of those rows, we get a new article returned. So we use the article node. We pull the author node, and then we create a new instance of the user entity, and then pass that through. And then we have the array of tags, and the favorite count and the favoritive, so whether it's true or false. So that's the value there. So that all that information is stored just temporarily in memory for the duration of the request, and then all the information is then basically spat out through this toJSON method. So if the article is not found, for example, in this delete slug, then we could throw a not found exception. Otherwise, we use the toJSON method. Cool. So if you're interested in how all of these these tests are implemented, then feel free to take a look in the repository. So everything is basically the actions sits under source, and then either article or user at the moment. And there's also this this Postman collection, which I put in the root of the repository. So what you can do is you could just download that and then add that into Postman. So you go to import, and then you could just drag in the file and then drop it in there, and you'd have the same test available. Cool, but we're gonna skip ahead a little bit. I think I've done most of these tests. I've done the auth, I've done the articles, and I've done the articles favorites and comments there. So for example, if we do a post request to /article/slug or a slug and then /favorite, then it will create basically a relationship between the user and the article. So we take the article, we find the article by the slug, the user by the user ID, which comes from the request again, then merge a relationship between the two. If that is being created for the first time, then we set a timestamp there. So we could just tell basically the date and time that the user has liked that or favorited that article. Cool. So let me see if these all run. So favorite, we can unfavor that. We can create a comment for the article. We can find all of the comments for the article. Okay, that's not working. So let's double check this. So we've got the get request to /comments, which is this one here. So we use the article service to get the comments. And then the error is at the moment it can't map on undefined. So this comment is undefined at the moment. Okay, so if we take a look at the environment variables, and we can find the ID. So there's no ID in there at the moment. So we've got an ID there. So okay, so it's for the slug. So in theory, that should be our slug. That should be what we want. Cool, because we've got that. The data is in there, so we've got the thanks so much. So let's see what we can do on this one. Okay. So if we double check that slug, see if that's correct. Yeah, looks good. So what we can do is we can test this in the browser. So if I set the param to be that value. And then we can basically copy this again, copy this query, and then run it in the browser. That should give us the results. Okay. So let's double check that. So that should be right. So let's try and create that comment again. Perfect. So everything's there. Everything looks good. If I look at the comment, we have the user commented on a comment. Okay, so it's not on. It's got the relationship type wrong there. Cool. So if I delete that node again and then run the query, hopefully it should now work. Cool. So we've got the comments there. So this is the comment, and then we have the author there. So actually, one thing we probably want to do is order it by c.createdAt in descending order. So then we'll get the comments all in order. Perfect. If I then delete that, can't delete because it's not found. Just in case any of these aren't being added to the environment variables, I want to delete that comment. Oh, we haven't got the method actually implemented there. So if I delete, and then param ID should be a string. I can delete comment, so that should take the slug, and it should also take the comment ID. So there's only one there. So basically what we want to do, if we just want to return OK, we don't really want to return any information about the comment that was deleted. So if I run that again, internal server, can't use get ID of null. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to use the guard on that one as well, because that user needs to be logged in. So if we don't have that guard, then the user isn't going to be appended to the request. Comment ID. Okay. That's what it is. So the value that you put inside this parameter, then it gets it basically looks for the value inside inside there. So if I again, everything should be fine. So they're both in there. There's no nulls. I'll run that again. Okay, perfect. So if we look back in the database now, then if we look for comments, we have this one here, which I don't think is the one that we created a couple. Let's double check the ID. So it's A9C. A9C, weird. Okay. Four, not on. There's no way this is going up on YouTube. User commented 4. Cool. Keep the comments coming, by the way. It's distracting me from how horribly bad this is going so far. Right, let's see what's going on. So we've got the user ID there, and then we want the slug as well. So I'm going to set that as the slug, and then the comment ID should be that. It's the user ID. So that is the comment ID. So I try and slow down the transitions. So comment ID is that. And then this is our user ID. Right, if we see if they exist. Commented. It's not comment, it's commented. Right. Always helps when you get your query. All right. Cool. So everything's gone now. It's perfect. So I guess one thing we could do is we're returning true or false there. So if res.records.length is 1, then we return true, otherwise we return false. So what we can say is kind of like we've done here. So I guess that will be like the outcome. So if the outcome is false, then it throws a not found exception. So if I run that again, yeah, so 404 not found. So that kind of guides us towards the error. Cool. Okay. Right. So in theory, they all work. So let's look at these profile ones now. Then. So we've got one article in there basically. So it looks like what this test does is it runs a post request to users, and then it creates a new user. So it's basically using the same environment variables. So for example, the username there is Twitch. but it's put in a celeb underneath it. And it looks like the goal of that is because you want to follow that that user later on down the line. So you want to follow the user based on their email, which looks a bit strange. There we go. So if I run that request, then we should get everything okay. Yep. So we've got that celeb, so celeb Twitch. We can use the get. So get that person. So that's /profiles. So I think I might. Does that need to be users? Okay, let's go for it. Right, so the first bit, proper development. So if so basically I want to create a new controller now. So it's all part of this this user module. It's part of this user sort of subdomain. If you're going in DDD terms. So if I generate a controller and I say user /profile controller, that should now create me this profile, so the profile controller there. Cool. So any request to /profile will get routed through to this bit. So it's automatically registered for me. So I've got that profile controller, which is registered as a controller. So Nest will know to register that on anything that implements this user controller. Cool. So the method is get profiles / and then the name. So it should be the profiles controller. So it's a get request. And then we want that to be, so get index. So make that async so we can use the methods there. So we want the username there, so celeb Twitch. If we double check the article controller. So we want to do the same thing, so we want to get the parameter out of that URL. So the parameter is the first of that, so we'll call that username. And then we use the param decorator. Username. So if I just return that username for now. Cool. So now we've got this this test is kind of running, so it's returning back the user, so it's celeb Twitch. But right now the test results are so the tests are failing basically. So it's because I'm not returning any JSON at the moment. It's trying to convert that into JSON. So if we take a look at the tests, we want a 200 OK response, which is getting, and I guess it's failing on this line. So it's trying to pass the response as JSON. Because that's not a JSON value, then it's not working. So basically, we want a profile value, and then that profile should be an object. It should have a username, a bio, an image, and then a following. So I'm guessing that should be like a Boolean, true or false, based on whether the user is logged in or not. So for example, if I say profile, and then we'll just pass that through for now. So this should pass a couple of tests. Yeah, it's just passed 3 of the 6 tests. So the response is okay. We've got a profile there, we've got a username there, but we don't have the rest of the information. So what we should be doing is finding this user based on the based on its username. So if we look in the user service, so we've got a create method there, we've got find by email, and we've got update user. So what we want to do really is we want to copy that into a find by username function. So that username should be a string, and then it should return a promise, which should either be a user or undefined. Cool. So we want to use the Neo4j service. So list.neo4j service. We want a read query. And basically what we want to do is say, find me a user where the username is equal to the username parameter. And I want it to return the user node. So again, we say that the result is what gets resolved from that promise. And then we basically call the same thing again, actually. So so if res.records.length is truthy, so it's either going to be 1 or 0. So if it's 1, then return a new user based on the U, so this U here. Otherwise, it will return undefined. So then we can handle that in the controller. Cool. So what we can do is we can inside the constructor, because we want to use that user service, we can inject that in. So private read only user service. Spent too much time writing Java. Cool. So import that in. And then we can say that the user is this dot user service dot find by username. We pass through the username. We want to await that as well because that will return a promise. So if the user is undefined, so if it's falsy, then we can throw a not found error, a not found exception. User not found. Otherwise, we'll return that profile, and then that profile will be the value there. So what we want to do is say that that is user.toJSON. So all that logic is kind of done for us already. All we need is the profile. Cool. So 5 out of 6 are passing at the moment. So there's no following property at the moment. So what we want to do is we want to find whether the user is followed by a particular user. So what we can do is we can create a new method. So we can call that so is following. So let's call it the target user, and then I don't know if that's a good example or not. And then we can say we want the following user. So what we want to do is find whether there's a relationship between that user that is following and then the target. So again, we want a read query. So let me just copy this down again. So because these are both users, then we can say target ID will be target.getID, and then following ID would be following.getID. So basically what we want to do is we want to find from the user, so based on the ID of target ID, we want to find so the current user, so following ID. And then we want a relationship between the two. So we basically want so target follows that following. Cool. So what we can do is we can just turn that into a single statement. following and target. And that's a match query. Actually, so what we, yeah, so that should be fine. So return count style. That's count. And basically, so if it finds both users and everything is fine, then it will return one row and that will have a count of 1, otherwise it'll have a count of 0. So this should return a promise, which would resolve to a Boolean. And then we just want to return res.records.length, because just the fact that that result has been returned should be good enough for us. We don't really care how many times that's been followed. We just need to know it's there, basically. Right. So if we go back into here, so we can say so this.userService.isFollowing, and then we want the user, and then we want request.user. So what I need to do is I need to use the middleware now to work out whether that user exists, and if it does exist, then I can just append that to it. So the example will be in the article controller, so we're using the JWT auth guard for these. Which is fine. Cool, so this will ensure that if the user is logged in, then that is then passed through to request.user. So that's always going to be a user. And then we want that to be the request. Choose that guy there. So if we take a look at Postman, so it wants the following profile, a following property on the profile. Cool. So what we can do is we can convert that. So we want all of the information from the user.2JSON. So use the spread operator for that. What was it called? It was called following. We want to wait that to get the response back. We can just add that on there. Cool, so if I run that, so again, we've got profile has a following property now, so we take a look at the body. So the following is true, which I don't think it should be. Let's double check what's going on with that query then. Okay, so it's giving me a count. So it's finding, I don't know what that's finding. That should be nothing. So let's take a look at these. Cool. So what I can do is, because I've got these values in an object, I can say params and then pass the value through, and then that should. So that used to work. Does it work with param? No, okay. Let's do it the old-fashioned way. So target ID should be that. Our following ID is that. Is that good? Cool. So if I copy the query over, yeah, actually, yep, you're right. So I was expecting it to not find, because it didn't find this value. So it won't find this relationship between the two. So I was expecting 0 rows. But for some reason it is giving me a row, but it's giving me none. But if I just return star, it gives me no rows. So that's a kind of, I guess, kind of weird quirk of Neo4j is it's doing that. So yeah, we have to check the count because we're doing a return of the count. But if we return the row, then the row count would be 0. So that's kind of weird, but okay. So res.records 0.getCount. Let's try that again. Cool. Following is false. That's exactly what we want. Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so no rows means count is 0. If you return a count, then there's one row, but with a count of 0 on there. Makes sense. Cool. Okay. So I was hoping I'd get all these things done because it seemed like such an easy thing to do, but I haven't got that done in an hour, so not good. But I'll carry on. I'll do the follow and the unfollow. Feel free to stick around if you want to drop off. Then feel free to drop off as well. Right. Okay. So following a profile. So we want a post request to this profiles, and then a username, and then /follow. So we want this to be in the profile controller, and then it was /follow, wasn't it? So the user is always going to be logged in, so we use that auth guard again. We want this to be a post request rather than a get request to username and then follow. So we'll create a method for that, so a handler. We want this to be, so I'll call this post follow. We want to get the username again. So what we want to do is in the user service, we want to create a new method for following. Get rid of that for a second. So async follow. So we want the username of the user that we want to follow, and then the user that is going to be doing the following, basically. So we'll switch those around so that kind of makes more sense. If we check the response, so we want a 200 response. So basically on the profile again, but we want this following to be true on the end of that. So it's basically the same response, but that following should be true. Cool. So we'll want to find that user again. To follow that a user. Actually, no, let's stick to where we are. Cool. So the user, we want to call this .user service, and then we want to .follow. It will be the request user. And at some point, it probably makes sense as well to create like a decorator for injecting the user, rather than just doing request.user the whole time. And then the username that we get from the request. If that username is not found, then we throw a 404. Otherwise, we return the information on the user, and then following should just be true. This returns a promise of user or undefined. Cool, so this is a write query. So we want this Neo4j .write. I'm going to match the target user where the username is a username. We'll pass that through as a parameter. And we want the user ID as well of the current user. So match the current user where the ID is user ID. I'm going to create a relationship. So we're looking for follows inside here. So the current user follows the target. We'll give that an alias, and then we'll say on create. So there'll only be one relationship between the user, or the two users. So we use the merge, and then on create set r.created at to be datetime. Cool, so that looks good. And then we want to return the target user. So then we take the response. And then we want, so res.records 0 get target. So we want to return basically a new instance of the user. Cool, and if res.records.length 0, then return undefined. So if it would either have not, well, okay, so we've already got the user, so it wouldn't have found that current user. So if that that current user hasn't been found, then it will be we'll throw this not found exception. Otherwise, we'll return the details of the user and then following to be true. So if I check that, so everything looks good. So I mean, Typescript's complaining there, but I think that's just a problem with that will work. So conversion type promise user to user. Oh, okay. So we need to await it. Cool. So that looks good. So we're finding the target user, the current user. We're merging a relationship between the current user and the target user. If we're creating that, then we set the created at property. Then we return the target user, which then gets hydrated out. Cool, so fingers crossed. Okay, so something's done, but something's failed. So we want a response of 200. So I'm guessing that's returning a 2. Yeah, so it's returning 201. So by default, Nest will return a 201 on a post request. To be honest, I don't agree with that. I think that should be a 201. So I'm going to change that to be 201 just so that the test pass, because you're creating the relationship between the two. Like you're not, it's not just an OK response. Have I broken it now? So 201, 201, 201. So what I'll do, I'll just. $201. Perfect. So all 7 passed now. So we've got the profile, which has got an image, it's got the bio, it's got the ID, email, username, and then the following is set to true. So it's always going to be set to true if we send a post request to this URL. Yeah. So if the username is invalid, so then that would be like it would be a 400. Sorry, a 404, because the user you're looking for doesn't exist. It's not the resource hasn't been found. So yeah, it should be either a 404 or it should be a 201 for created. In this case, so I mean that's my opinion anyway. If you've got any opinions on that, then yeah, then shout, I guess. Cool, yeah, and yeah. So I mean, the tests that I got, so I basically just pulled them down from the Realworld repository. So they encourage you to create your own implementation. So they provide you with a spec. So you've got the front end spec and then the back end specs as well. So for the back end specs, they give you all of the different endpoints and what they should look like. And then they give you the Postman collection as well. So you can just download that and then import that in. So I've included it in the root of not in that, in the root of this this repository. So yeah, you just download that and then you go to import, add the file in, and then job done. That's all you need to do. Cool. Okay. Yeah, and there's always like a weird lag. Cool. Okay. So that's done now. It's good. So unfollowing. So I guess we're kind of doing the same thing. So what's this one? So it's a delete request to the same same URL. So it should be delete, and then we want delete follow. And then we'll call the method unfollow, and then everything else should really be the same. So it should return false always. So that doesn't need to be async actually. So unfollow. So we're basically doing the same thing again. So we want the user, and then take what I do. As easier than explain it again. Cool. So we want to find the relationship. So R follows between those two. And then we want to delete R and then return the target. Cool. So I've removed the variable from there because we basically don't need it. We're using that inside the query. We don't need it anywhere else, so it just saves a little bit of memory. In terms of the way these two are written, so in this first query we've got like match target user first, and then we match current, and then we create the current follows target. So the direction of the relationship is important, because, well, basically, like it's kind of like if I'm following like a supermodel, they're not going to follow me. So that kind of like I follow them, they don't follow me, type relationship is there. So the actual direction is important, but the way that you write the query isn't important. So basically, when you run a query like this, like a match query, when the query first hits Neo4j, you get it's like a few milliseconds where it works out a plan. So if I just show, for example, so if I put profile up front, Pam username, whatever, and then run that again. So actually, this is kind of a bad thing. So I'm using like a node by label scan. But in theory, what Neo4j will do is it will look at the pattern in the query, and then it will work out the best way to run that query. So I mean, in this case, it will always be the same thing. So you're kind of looking at the cardinality. But say, for example, we had one user in 10 articles, and we were matching from user to an article. It would always start off at the user end first, because of the lower cardinality of the numbers. So that's a really cool thing. So actually, what I want to do on this one, actually, now I've got this up, is that it's a node by label scan. So basically, what will happen is right now the query will go through every single user until it finds one with the property with the value that we're looking for. So that's okay over 8 nodes, but if you do that over 8 million nodes, then it's going to take a long time. So basically, you can create an index or a constraint on the user and the username property, and then basically, I mean, it will use the index rather than looking for everything. So it's a lot more efficient when you're running the query. And then the selectivity of the index also influences how that query is profiled. Cool. So what we can do is, I mean, I could just run like a create constraint on user assert u dot username is unique. So I could just run it there, and then that would be fine. But obviously, this is like a TypeScript and nest thing. So probably we should put it in the application instead. So what we can do is in the user module, what we can do is we can implement something called on module init, and that's basically like a hook that you can add to any module. So when you have a module that Nest registers that has this on module in it, it will basically run a method. So the error here at the moment is that the property on module init is missing from type user module. So what I can do is I can create that as a function. And I can say, for example, like console.log init user module. And then if I fix this, then you see it's got there the user module has been registered, it's been created, and then that method is being called. So what I can do is I can use the Neo4j service to create that constraint inside Nest instead. So as I add new modules to the application, I don't need to run any migration scripts because Nest will take care of that for me. So I can, in the constructor, again, I can inject the Neo4j service. So private read only Neo4j service, Neo4j service. And I can say this dot Neo4j service dot write. So it's not a read query, it's a write query. Create constraint on the user, assert that the username is unique. Then, so constraint created. doesn't look good. Okay, so I've tried to create this now, and then I've got two users with the username of Twitch, which isn't good. So if I just take a look at these, yeah, so I've got two records there. Let's just delete the first one. So you can't delete a node that has relationships on it. So instead of delete, I can use detach delete, which will detach relationships and then delete the node itself. Cool. So if I run this again, it's all good. So the constraint's been created. So the one caveat to this this method is that if I run this again, because I've already got the constraint, Neo4j will throw back an error. So it doesn't just yeah, yeah, it doesn't fail silently. But I mean, what we could just do is just say, like, catch, if there's an error, then whatever, do nothing, and then that'll be fine. So then if I run, so if I run, for example, this query again, and I run a profile on there, then I'm using a node unique index seek. So it's using the unique index to find the user based on that username. So that's going to be a hell of a lot quicker than doing the node scan. Cool. And again, we can do, so we've got loads of things that we're looking up. So I guess we could do that for the user ID. We could use it for the articles and things like that. Whether it's a good practice or not, I don't know. I think it's probably a good thing that it's there. So in terms of it being initialized, it's only initialized when the application restarts. So for as many queries that come in, that query is only going to be started once. So for example, if you had like a load balancer that had 3 application servers on there, then in theory that would be run 3 times, and then when you run the next upgrade, or you auto scale the group, then you'll get the next one. I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to be convinced either way. I think it's okay. But yeah, I mean, people may have a different opinion. Some people may think, well, actually, we want to create that outside of the application. We want to create that during the data import process, and that's fair enough. That's fine as well. But yeah, I'd say it's fine. Cool. Okay. So we've got that in there. Right. So what was I looking at? So param username is celeb Twitch. Cool. So let's try that request. User celeb Twitch not found. So do we have the user in there? So we've got username celeb Twitch and we've got Twitch. So have I done that on the wrong property? So the target with the username of username. So target user with the username of username followed by user ID. So does that come off okay? Yeah, celeb Twitch. So in theory, I should be able to return style map. So nothing there. Okay, users there. Okay, so it's in our controller. So the profile controller. So I'm guessing it'll be this bit here. So what we want is for this request. What we want to do is we don't really we always want to return a user because we always want that user detail. So we can say that we'll find that user, and then we can say that for each of the rel in, and we use a pattern comprehension there. So target follows user. We'll delete that rel. And we'll return the target. So if the user isn't currently following them, then I mean we don't really want to complain too much about that. Cool. So there's the value there, and then the following there is false. Cool, awesome. So we can now follow somewhere, we can unfollow them. So I'll just create that relationship again. The one thing left is tags. So let's take a look at the test. So we want a 200 OK. So we want a tags property which contains an array of the tags. So the tags are so these nodes here. So they've got an ID, a name, and a slug. So I guess so. In hindsight, if I was going to create this again, I would, instead of having this article module, I would have like a content module, and then the articles and tags would sit inside there. So I guess I just stick that in there for now. So I want to generate a new controller for the tags. So let's call that article/tags. And then I want to generate a new service. So nest generate service, and then article tag service. And what do I want to keep? I want to keep that's fine, whatever. Don't want to worry too much about that. So this is basically is a list of all of the tags. So in the user service, no, in the article service, I created this list function, which basically has all of the info in there. So it doesn't look like there's any pagination. There's no hints as to what's there. It's just a pure list. So we just call that list, and then that will be return a promise, which will resolve to list of tags. So I'll create a tag. So export class tag. So I want the node. This dot node was node. And again, I'll implement like a toJSON method on there as well. And then for this, I just return this dot node dot properties. So node I need to import from Neo4j driver. Cool. Because there's no, I mean, with like the user, for example, the whole reason I went for with this pattern is that I wanted to hide things like the password. I wanted to manipulate the bio or the image to return like a default image. But yeah, I mean, it's just like just a nice wrapper, I guess. Cool. So I'll import that tag in. And then, so I need the Neo4j service. So private read-only Neo4j service, which is a Neo4j service. Neo4j service.read t tag return t. The res, so I want to return res.records.map row new tag row.getT. Cool. So for the tag controller, I want to inject the tag service. So I want a private read-only tag service. Get list. That's a get query. And then just return this dot tag service.list. And then that should be inside a tags object. So let's take a look at that. So tags there, so it's an object at the moment, so I guess it's not being hydrated properly. So I can say map tag.toJSON. Oh no, actually, so tags is await. So it's the function returns a promise, so I just need to await that. Async. That should be okay now. Awesome. So we should have two tags in there. Yep. So we've got the ID name and the slug of each one of those. Cool. Okay. So that is all of the test passing. There may be one or two that I've missed inside there, but in theory that should all work. So I guess in another session, what I'll do is I'll hook up this UI to the back end and just make sure everything works, and then clean up around that. But yeah, so like I say, everything is up on GitHub. So I'll push the changes to this in the next half an hour or so to this Neo4j Nest.js Realworld example app, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, so I guess like in terms of this next steps, so the entities and things like that. So I mean, we could use something like Neode. We could use something like Dravine, some sort of OGM, ORM to hydrate the results and write the queries for us. You know, could use like a DSL to run the queries and to auto-generate the queries for us at the moment. There's nothing really for Typescript, which is on that level at the moment. So yeah, I think we just have to play it by ear on that one. But yeah, so in theory that should all be working. If anyone or the few people are watching, so if there are any questions, feel free to reach out. I mean, you can, if you have any questions on the Neoflix or the Twitch project, or if you'd like to build a front end, then feel free to reach out. Yeah, or create an issue or something like that. Or yeah, I'm Adam Cowley on Twitter. Or yeah, otherwise I'll see you next week. Cool. Thanks everyone. Take care.